Oh, hello, you gorgeous people of the internet. Welcome back or welcome to my channel. It is summertime over in my hemisphere, and that means everybody wants to carry a book, everybody wants to read, everybody wants to go to the beach, everybody wants to go to the park, everybody wants to go to a barbecue. And if you're at said barbecue and it gets a little bit stale conversation-wise, you're hanging out with people you don't usually hang out with, you can use a book as an escape. Just hide out in some back bathroom and read it the whole time. It'll be a useful time slot. What I'm trying to say is this is the time of year that I find people read a lot, maybe even more so than the winter, and people are always looking for a short book that they can take with them, something that they can kind of leisurely read, or something that they can just bang out in a day that's going to be fruitful and it's going to be beneficial for their life. So today I am coming at you with short books that you can actually read in a day. I have done this list before. I found it to be something that people liked, so I've added some new books. I'm not going to be doing any repeats. There's going to be similar genres, but I'm not going to be talking about the same exact books. So let's talk about them. But actually, before we get into it, I would like to give a huge thank you to today's sponsor, which is Skillshare. If you clicked on this video, you probably want to acquire a new skill. Maybe you're looking to better yourself. Maybe you're looking to use your time more wisely. Well, Skillshare is the place for you. If you've been on this channel before, you know that Skillshare is a friend of the channel. I have taken classes reamping my love for American Sign Language, my iPhone photography, learning how to edit better, which you have seen on my videos, hopefully. And this month, I am taking the class, Productivity Masterclass, Principles and Tools to Boost Your Productivity. What I like about this class is that it's actually breaking it down into more of a scientific approach, much less of a, you gotta do 5,000 crunches and make sure that you're up at 3 a.m. in the morning. This is much more of a positive approach to productivity, which you know is something that I'm pretty passionate about. He teaches you how to kind of guide your productivity, whether or not you are a plane or a pilot, looking at it from sort of like a nonfiction sense. You know that I love reading nonfiction, so for me, my mind works and give me the facts as to why I'm doing something. If productivity is not your thing, there are literally hundreds of classes that you can choose, ranging from DIY to marketing to animation to illustration to everything in between. You can get lost there, and what I love is that their classes are relatively short, but guide from one video to the next, gives you immediate information without it feeling like you have to field through it and find exactly what you're looking for. It's a great resource to have if you are looking to acquire a new skill, or maybe just learn something about yourself that you otherwise didn't think was possible. So if you want to get started in Skillshare, you can click the link in my bio or scan the QR code, and the first 500 people to use my link or QR code will get 20% off their first year of Skillshare. They're also offering a 7-day free trial and a 30-day money-back guarantee. They stand by their product. That's all I have to say. Thank you so much again to Skillshare for sponsoring today's video. You are always a friend of the channel. All right, now we can get into the books. I'm just realizing now, I hope that that was all in focus, so I'm gonna move these over here. I'm gonna start by talking about the newest book that I'm going to be reading, one that I haven't read yet, but one that's been on my radar for a very, very long time, so I can confidently say that I am going to probably enjoy it, and it's also something that I know that you can read in a day, and that is a play. I spoke about plays in the last video, and a lot of people were excited about that. I still need to make a video on my favorite plays. I apologize. I just have been reading a lot of newer plays, so not necessarily things that have been published, so I can't really air that out. I'm sorry. So let's talk about a play that has been established, A Raisin in the Sun by Lorraine Hansberry. I was just doing a little bit of research about Lorraine Hansberry, and apparently she wrote this at 29 years old, and then she unfortunately passed away about 5 years after. So I don't really think that she got to see, or maybe she started to briefly see, the significance of what her writing had done on Broadway and how it has been received as a classic piece of American theater. In her portrait of an embattled Chicago family, Hansberry anticipated issues that range from generational clashes to the civil rights and women's movements. She also posed the essential questions about identity, justice, and moral responsibility at the heart of these great struggles. The result is an American classic. I'm actually going to pick this up today because I just finished the last book that I was reading, so this was the next one on my TBR. Again, a play runs at most 4 hours. This is not going to be a 4-hour play. I would say this is probably like a 2-hour play, a production. So reading it will be even quicker. I feel like they get overshadowed by a lot of traditional text, but really, if you just love characters, if you want to get into the mind and movements of a character, there's no better resource than reading a play. That's all I gotta say. Rhyming today. Wow, okay. The next category of books that I want to talk about is short stories. Now, I'm not a huge lover of short stories. I either have incredibly amazing experiences with short stories, or I just think they're really boring and just misplaced plots that really didn't make sense in a full-length thing, whatever. Anyway, I've had a lot of success with short stories this year, and I want to share them with you. These are definitely things that you can read in a day. The first one is Interpreter of Maladies by Jhumpa Lahiri. This was a book that was hotly contested to potentially become my book club pick last month. It was beat out by Clara and the Sun, but I know a lot of people read this alongside me. This is a fantastic collection of short stories. Oh my goodness. Obviously, in a short story collection, some stories are stronger than others, but this, every single one had something that you could take away from it. You could resonate with a character. It's looking all into essentially the immigrant experience or loss of customs when moving to a new land. This is a beautiful analysis on just the human conditions, the emotions that we feel when we take on a new identity, love, sex, rage. Oh, it sounds like an Eve Babbitt's novel, but it's not. This is so great. I felt like I was in the 2000s, 90s movie. I was reading this on the subway when it was raining, and I loved it. I felt it. The Interpreter of Maladies, the titular story, is so good, and so many movements and pivots take place in a small amount of pages that you just can't help but really, really enjoy this writing. Really great, highly suggest. You can definitely read this in a day. The next one that I want to talk about is Friday Black. I've talked about this on the channel before. I talked about how much I liked this, and this kind of reinvigorated more of a positive stance on short stories. This is great, and maybe it's just because I've worked a lot of my life in retail. This just spoke to me on so many different levels. This is all about consumerism, the way that we shop, the frenzied idea that purchasing will bring you more happiness. And it's also looking at life through like a dystopian lens as well. All of these stories have a very dystopian feel to it, very heightened reality. And I've said this once, but I'll say it again. If you've worked Black Friday in any capacity, whether it be retail or food service, anything that's just been around that day of people going nuts for sales, you are going to resonate with a couple of these stories. And what I found really interesting is that instead of what a lot of short stories do, which is just keep on reintroducing new characters, he goes back and touches base with a couple of characters that he's introduced in one story and kind of infuses them into another story as well. I was late to the game on this, but I thought that this was a fantastic book and just a lot of different narratives to follow, but overall great, and I thought a really solid collection of short stories. Definitely can read in a day. And then the other one that I want to talk about, and I wasn't in love with this, but I want to talk about this author because I know a lot of people really like her writing, specifically Kitchen, which I think is probably her most famous novel, Lizard by Banana Yoshimoto. I talk about this more because I just like the author's viewpoints. I think she's kind of like a little bit of a radical and a little bit of a almost punk girl in the way that she talks through her stories. These are all just meditations on Japanese life and the way that people go about relationships or the way that they grieve. It's very slow moving, its pace is a lazy disposition, but I think that the characters are strong throughout. I read this in the winter, which I don't think was the best time to read this. I think if I read it in the sun and I was really invigorated by the vibrant life around me, I would probably get a little bit more out of it, but definitely something you can read in a day. I mean, you look at the way that it's spaced out and it's just asking you to read it in a day, and sometimes I think with short stories, it's much more beneficial to read them in a day because you're just flowing and moving through them so quickly. It's the theme of the novel translates a lot better, I think, when it's just throughout one day as opposed to trying to pick up the pieces one day after another. All right, so now let's get into fiction, baby. Let's talk about the fiction books. We're gonna do that. The first one is like a sad one. Okay, if you want to cry at the beach, if you want to cry at the family function, you can read this. This will bring a tear to your eye. And this is a new release, and I read this in the winter, and again, I sobbed. But this is a winter book, but read it in the summer. Why not? Throw a wrench in things. Blue Light Hours by Bruna, Dantas, Lobato. All about a young girl moving from Brazil to a rural town in Vermont to attend college. And it's essentially about the long distance relationship that she has with her mother, and in turn her cultural identity back in Brazil, who she is. Blue Light Hours takes its name from the amount of time that she spent calling her mother over Zoom or Skype, I think it was at that time. Trying to maintain a relationship with your mother while still becoming an independent individual, how you evolve and change. And again, similar to Interpreter of Maladies, in a different country, when you have so much of yourself back from where you're originally from. I think that this works best read in a day. I think if you don't read it in a day, it loses a lot of its momentum, it loses a lot of its charm. You 1,000% can read that in a day and you'll sob. At the end, you will sob, thinking it's going in one direction, but then it ends up being a pretty positive story. This wasn't the best thing that I've ever read, but I think I quite literally did read this in a day, or read the majority of it in a day and then read 15 minutes of it the day after. So this is good. Feels kind of like a winter read, but why not cry at the park? Cry in public. That's what summer's for, baby. All right, the next one, I can easily say that this is a good spring-summer book, and that is Pedro, Páramo by Juan Rulfo. Considered a classic. Lots of people love this. This was actually the first book that I read for my Patreon book club. Sign up if you want to have fun. This one took me a lot longer than a day to read, but in retrospect, you could read it in a day. I think that it comes in at 130 pages maybe, and that is including the translator's note, which I highly suggest you read. Such a kind of whimsical story, definitely very magical realism. It takes place over divisions of time and plot and homes, and if that even makes sense. Sometimes I got a little lost, but that is to happen when you are embarking on a journey, which is what this main character is doing. Following a man who's trying to find out about his father. His mother is dying, and she kind of sends him on this journey to understand about the land and the people that were associated in their life, and really just the fundamentals of who he is. I would actually reread this because I think when I first read it, I might have glazed over a lot of the most important things, but as I've matured, I would like to read this again. 100% can be read in a day, and a classic, so why would you not read it? Okay, the next one is a New Yorker book. And you know that I'm a New Yorker, so I can talk about this book. That is The Princess of 72nd Street by Elaine Kraf, with an introduction by Melissa Broder, my girl. This is about a woman who is toying around New York City, dating, trying to figure out her life, and when she gets in these very tense and temperamental situations, she kind of embodies a new person to take over for her, and that is the Princess of 72nd Street. Now, when I first talked about this on the channel, I apologize. I feel like I made this book seem like it was a very jovial, easy, loose, happy-go-lucky sort of book. I talked about it a little bit more densely in my vlog where I covered this, but this takes sharp turns, and towards the end it's very sad. But there were parts of just absolute brilliant comedic timing throughout this, and I think if you have ever lived in New York City and you have dated and you have experienced the downtown scene and the downtown people that you meet, everything feels like profiling of a stereotype of New Yorker in this. And it's great in those moments. And then at the end, it gets very depressing and sad, but this is all about just a woman's, essentially a manic episode of life in New York City and how she overcomes that in ways. It's really interesting, I'd say. And I would like to revisit this again. I think this comes in at about 160 pages, but for any New Yorkers, even though this was written in, oh no, there's 130 pages, even though this was written in the 70s, I believe, 1979, this feels as pertinent as any contemporary book that you'll read. It translates really well to today's 2025 New York City. And then another book that I almost read in a day, or at least had the potential to read in a day, but didn't. That is The Trees by Percival Everett. I think what I liked about this the most is the characterization of people in this. This read like a screenplay. Now, I kind of lost a little bit of momentum at the end. I kind of lost the passion that I had in the beginning. If you just read through this, cruise through this, it feels like it's a really thick book, but it's a lot of dialogue, which reads quite fast, especially because these characters are so well illustrated and they're so embodied in the moment that you just propel forward. This is about a southern town that has these strange slew of killings, and it's happening to the family, the descendants of the woman and the men who murdered Emmett Till. I'm so happy that Everett is getting the accolades and the praise that I think he deserves as a writer. This looks really big, but you can definitely read this in a day, and you probably will once you get so engrossed in it. And I'm realizing right now that I'm forgetting Less Than Zero by Bret Easton Ellis. You know I love him. You know that I love him. Okay, we love this bad boy. This was his first book. I think he wrote it when he was 21 years old, which is astounding. It's kind of set the scene for Bret Easton Ellis, the controversial, the jarring, and the charismatic writer that he would become. This follows a cast of California wealthy kids as they go through life and boredom and the way that they fill their time. Is it drugs? What is it? What makes these kids tick? I think the fact that it was written by a 21-year-old of essential privilege and wealth makes it that much more fun in a way, because it's not somebody who's older looking and trying to emulate the way that kids of the time were acting. It's somebody of that age who very much was probably running in those circles. And if you've listened to any interviews, some of these characters are based on people that he knows. There was a movie made which was kind of a flop. I'm so upset because if you know me, I loved The Shards by Bret Easton Ellis, which came out a couple of years ago. Absolutely loved it. They're adapting a movie and they've cast a couple of people that are very questionable, and I don't love that. So just revel in the life and times before they made those horrible casting decisions and read Less Than Zero. Is it my favorite Bret Easton Ellis? No. I definitely think some of his stronger writing is in his longer books, but this is something that you can read in a day. Definitely bring to the beach. People say, oh, what are you reading? And you drop your Wayfarers and you say, oh, Bret Easton Ellis. And they'll say, that's just how it goes. I was going to talk about some nonfiction, but you know what? This has gone on long enough, so we're going to be just living in the world of fiction today. I think that's great. I think that's fun, and I think that's fine for the summer. Let me know, what's a short fiction book that you love, that you enjoy, that you can't wait to read this summer? Summer's the time of the short book, babe, or the long one. I'm definitely going to be reading some long ones, and maybe I'll make another video about big books. Big books, baby. Short books today, big books tomorrow. You guys are wonderful. You're fabulous. Thank you so much for being here. I will see you